How does picking the right tabletop RPG system help you theme your game? You sit down ready to take notes about an upcoming game, but quickly discover that you have no idea where to begin. What kind of game are you trying to run? What is the spark that turns your ideas into a blazing bonfire of inspiration? Where are the characters from? What type of setting do you want to explore? Many of these questions can be answered simply by choosing which tabletop system you want to use to run your game. So we're going to talk about which questions you should ask yourself and your players before committing to a particular game system tonight on Playing God. I'm Nick Logie, and with me on the other side of the internet is Xander Sniffly Nose Nolan.
Hey, man.
At the end of the day, so much is dictated by what system you choose to run your game. Classes, archetypes, character races, the setting, style of game, and of course, the game mechanics themselves. Xander, why is the game system you choose important to the style you're trying to run?
Well, when you sit down and you break down all of the options that are before you, because believe me, there are many. When you sit down and you want to run a classic hack and slash Tolkien-esque game, you probably want to pick Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, because the game system is tailored and designed specifically for that kind of setting. Whereas if you want to run a gritty, modern horror game, World of Darkness is a perfect choice, but the difference between the two systems is vast in comparison. One has werewolves and mages and vampires that are all well fleshed out, and their powers are very specific to each of the archetypes. And the system, as far as dice, because you have dice pool with d10s instead of the classic d4 d6 all the way up to a d20. So when you want to run a game and you want to go and pick your theme, using the game system to dictate the theme is a good idea. Or if you want to run a specific kind of theme, do a little bit of research and look out there what kind of game systems already have this in play. You want to run space stuff, there's space stuff. These things are already tailored to specific systems, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to try and get a quasi-futuristic kind of theme to set for Dungeons and Dragons, because you can
always
believe me.
force the system to do what you want it to do. But if you read the flavor text, if you look at just how the rules are written and how they seem to expect the players to play, then you'll find that each game system, when they're being developed, is being tailored to a certain ideology. With Dungeons
Absolutely.
and Dragons, it is about the high fantasy, blast things with fireballs, go into a dungeon, slay a dragon, steal all his crap. But
Yep.
you could even do that with World of Darkness. It's going to be hard to try to convert the play style to the other system, because when you read the World of Darkness stuff, it's all about like intrigue, it's all about mystery, it's all about like the unseen dread that lurks just beyond the shadows, where you can kind of see the teeth of the monster, but you can't see the whole thing.
Yeah. So when you sit down and when you look at the different game systems, let's say you want to run the classic dungeon crawl kind of D&D thing, then you obviously pick Dungeons and Dragons rather, and be the dungeon master. And then you get into the realm of an important question that you should ask yourself is, how easy is this system for the players and for the GM to use? And both Nick and I have used a sliding scale that kind of dictates that for both player and GM difficulty. Good example, Shadowrun. Nick, that's your game.
That
Tell
is
us
my
about
game. It's also a game I didn't fully learn until about 2 years after running it in 5th ed.
Yep.
So that's one of those games where it's very complicated. It encompasses a lot of stuff. Even in Shadowrun itself, there are actually effectively 3 layers of play. The Astral, the Meat Space, and then the Matrix. And each of those has their own separate rules. And then on top of that, there are rules on how they interact with each other. So there's a lot going on just right off the bat.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a hard system to pick up. Like, it's not one you generally see people say, hey, it's their first system. Guess what? It was my first system. And typically people will go to Dungeons and Dragons. It's the most mainstream of any of the role-playing games. It's usually synonymous with the word role-playing
Yep.
because it is built to be rather simple. That doesn't mean you can't get the complexity out of it, but at face value, it's about rolling a single die, adding a number to it, hoping that it's high, and then doing whatever it is that results in that die roll.
Yeah.
There's not like subsequent rolls like some systems. Shadowrun, for example, let's compare that to the same scenario in Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun. I want to shoot an orc with a bow. Now, in Dungeons and Dragons, you roll your d20, you add your to hit, you check against AC, you do damage. Done. That's your turn. In Shadowrun, it's roll to hit. Does the orc want to try dodging? He could try doing that. Have you hit? How well did you hit? All right, so now you've shot him with an arrow. What's the armor piercing and the damage on that arrow? Okay, how many degrees of success did you get beyond just a flat you hit? And then, all right, so now that we know that, the orc rolls his armor save to see how much damage is negated. It's a very simple version of that, but that one action changes vastly depending on which system you're using.
Oh, yes, it does.
And you want to keep that in mind when you are selecting the system, because if it's something that you want to tackle as a GM, and it's something that your players also want to pursue, then even if you're not an expert on it, go ahead and try it. Like, it's a fantasy game. It's about creative make-believe. So just go for ham. If you can get a player that is familiar with that system, maybe someone to help you out, like with certain rules calls, that's always welcome at the table.
Oh, yeah. Even if it's just Dungeons and Dragons, where it's fairly simple to roll up a character and it's fairly simple to run the game, things get more complex the higher levels you get, and the way the characters can interact with one another, both in combat and out of combat, can get to be a little more hairy. So having someone that knows the system is always a good thing. Shadowrun, for example, for that sliding scale, it is a hard on both player and GM, because character creation took us like 6 hours. It was.
So when I got the
character.
5th Ed book, I wanted to make my own character, and I'd never played 5th Ed before. In fact, I didn't really do that much 4th edition, so I was already like, there's a lot of changes here. So I sat down and made my own character, just to go through the process and be able to tell you guys what to do when you got to it.
Yep.
Because there's some confusing ass shit how the rules as written are.
Oh
so
yeah,
the
it
first,
reads like a textbook.
The first character took me like 8 or 9 hours to completely do.
Oh yeah.
And then it took you guys like 5 or 6 hours when I knew what I was doing for the most part, and telling you guys how to go through it. It was so much huge process. So if you don't want to spend a bunch of time in character creation, you should avoid one of those super complicated systems.
Yeah, and keeping in mind that when you sit down to roll a character, because as a GM, the first thing you should do when you have a system, especially if you're unfamiliar with it, is to roll up a character, see how long it takes you, see what kind of options there are.
And the reason for that is because that's also going to be the first thing your players do.
Mm-hmm. That, and when you go to create a scenario in which your players are going to run through, let's say they have to get through the foyer of this building, that where it's be very simple to run that in D&D. It's okay, you've got 3 guys in here, they're all shooting crossbows at you, and so let's resolve combat. Takes maybe 45 minutes or so, because it's just 3 guys. When you hit Shadowrun, you've got to account for so many things, the power levels of the characters, what kinds of different things are happening with the characters individually, and then try to tailor that entire thing to fit within the rule system. And it's just as complicated to be a DM for a game system like that, because you have to create all of the NPCs that you're using, especially combat NPCs, and then you have to create the challenge encounters, like can you get past a locked door. There's about 15 rolls you got to make to figure out whether or not you can brute force your way into a node to get into the matrix portion of a system, when the same kind of thing of busting a lock is 1 roll in D&D and you're done. Either you succeed or you fail.
So
It's really complex.
So I don't want to derail you too much or contradict everything you just said, but I'm kind of going to here for a second.
All
So
right.
let me go ahead and do this before you dissuade anybody who's listening from ever playing Shadowrun, because that sounds like terribly unwieldy. So once you get the rules for Shadowrun, like even just bits and pieces of it, once you understand that rule, you pretty much don't have to look it up again. It's pretty easy to keep track of because it becomes more natural to you once you actually start doing something that
Oh,
complicated.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
ironically, even when you said earlier with the three guys in the crossbow, once you know how combat works, I found that Shadowrun combat gets resolved way faster, even with all the complexity, than Dungeons and Dragons combat. D&D combat takes forever. Like, I don't know why it is, because it's simple, but for some reason it just does. But I
Yeah.
do want to use that example that you presented, Xander. So yeah, let's start with the Shadowrun aspects, since that's what you ended on. Um, with those three guys, let's say there's the same three guys, except instead of crossbows they have guns, or you can give them crossbows. It's Shadowrun, who cares?
Yeah.
So what you've already heard what Xander had to say, but in addition to what like those roles he was using in his example was like maybe your instead of your locksmith or lockpicker or rogue, whatever you want to call him, instead of like breaking through a physical door in Shadowrun, you're also having to keep in mind who is there virtually, and is this door an
Yeah.
electronic door? Can they open it remotely? What kind of biometric locks does it have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, D&D, depending on how you want to tackle it as a GM, it can also get that complicated because the rules don't inherently make it so, but you still have to think of kind of the same scenario. When they roll up on this foyer, was the front door locked? Is it booby trapped? What's the to hit of the booby trap when they set it off? Like, what's the effect? Does it affect any of the three guys that are in there? What are their positions? Because that still matters.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like there are other aspects of it, like whether or not there is maybe an alarm system, because in Shadowrun that's going to be typical. When you set off some kind of electronic tripwire, then you're going to alert the corporation, and they're going to be like, "Oh fuck, we need to get these guys out of here now." In Dungeons and Dragons, something similar could happen in that, oh, there's like this bell that's next to one of the guys with the crossbow. He sees the doors getting opened up, and he's like, ding, 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 ding. And that alerts the rest of this syndicate or whatever who's in this building to send reinforcements. So the complexity mostly comes from how you want to run the game. Um, well, which is why choosing the right system is important, because if the way you want to run a game is a super complicated, like multi-layered Shadowrun game, you can use D&D for that, like the example I just did, but it's going to be a lot different.
Yeah.
And
Your
you're going to have
flavor.
an even entirely different scenario with the like using World of Darkness or like Deadlands or Savage
Oh,
Worlds or
yeah.
whatever it happens to be. Um, so that's good. Other than the ease of the system, a good starting question is, what genre of game are you trying to run? With the examples we just gave you, that involves breaking and entering and fighting. So if you're doing a combat centric game, then think of what games are the most fun to actually do those combats. What would you like to see a lot of? What would you like to lose a lot of NPCs to? Is kind of a question I, as a GM, ask myself, because that's what's going to happen. You're building guys to die is effectively what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you're not wanting to do the combat and you want to maybe aim for a more political game, then maybe consider using something like the Fate system, which is much more fluid in how you describe everything. It allows a lot more player engagement in affecting the scene.
Hmm.
And there's also a lot of specific derivatives from Fate that you could use as individual games. I'm trying to remember the one that we played. It was a long time ago. It was about I think it was The Blooded. I think that's what it's called. It was about Atlantis, and it was basically just you or these immortals that were doing all these political backstabbing and like going to each other's parties, and you're like, yes, I totally would like to ally with you while stabbing them in the back. That is a perfect game for like politics, I guess.
Yeah.
Xander, what would you pick for like maybe an exploration based game?
First thing that comes to my mind is D&D, and the reason why is it gives you the opportunity to walk around in a world that by and large isn't super developed. There's not a lot of things and barriers in your way if you want to run something that's more outdoorsy and wilderness like. So you'll be doing a lot of camping, a lot of, woodland creatures and things like that. But on the flip side, there can be just as much exploration in, say, a Shadowrun game because you have this whole sprawling city to your disposal that you can build buildings for and put gangs and all kinds of things into to really amp up the things that you can find. But for exploration, I think I would either go with one of those two, or maybe even the Iron Claw system, where you play anthropomorphic characters. It's also really good for political too. It's a bunch of tribes kind of waging war at one another. But offers a lot of replayability and the exploration of not just the environment, but also character creation.
Wait, hold on. What do you mean by replayability?
With the archetypes that you have at your disposal, there's like 75 of them.
Oh, so you have a
And
lot of
each one
options
them,
for characters that you're not going to, like, go
exactly.
retreading on old territory.
Yeah, like I was like, oh, I played a monk, so I'm gonna play a spellcaster this time. The fighters are the fighters, the mages are the mages, the rogues are the rogues, and that's pretty much how D&D works. There's not a lot of gray area there. There is some supplement books out there that you can get, but with something like the Ironclaw system, like you probably won't ever play the same kind of character twice because there's just so many options and so many nuances to each one of the characters. So that offers a lot of exploration as far as characters and stuff like that too. So it's not just about the setting.
That's actually a good point. If you're looking for a wide variety of like characters for you to dabble with or your players to play, then yeah, it sounds like Ironclaw is a pretty good system. You could also look into like more broad mechanical games that don't focus too much on the setting, but more rather the delivery method for putting the players into whatever the hell you want. I'm thinking things like Savage Worlds, which you could basically just reflavor everything in there to match whatever setting you're trying to encompass. But they try to give you as many tools as possible in order to make whatever you want. So, for example, if you wanted to make in Deadlands a mad scientist, which I mean, everybody knows what a mad scientist is. Whatever you're picturing is right because it's the Wild West and it's just fucking crazy.
Oh yeah.
If you use like the Savage World systems, which has magic in it, but it's just like broad spell descriptions and stuff like that, then you could basically make the mad scientist from the Savage World systems using the quote unquote magic because it's labeled as stuff like energy bolt or something like that as one of the spells. You could easily, and it even encourages you to do this, reflavor that to, instead of being an energy bolt that I summoned through the power of Jesus, instead it's one of those 50s looking ray guns with like the coil around the barrel and it shoots a green laser beam at people. It's the same quote unquote spell, but it's been retooled into something that has its own flavor to it.
Very versatile system.
Right. So if you're looking for a lot of options and you really just want to be like, all right, I just want a rule set to let them do their thing, but the thing I care about the most is I want to make this cool world that's completely mine and I want to fill it with all these neat things and these are the kind of like physical rules I want to apply to like the setting and all that. And then at that point, you just go with whatever.
Yeah. A really good one for mystery would probably be World of Darkness. It's got a lot of the gray areas for you to tamper with and play with as a GM. It's definitely good in my book. What do you think about that one, Nick?
All right, so World of Darkness, and I know a lot of people already disagree with me on my stance on World of Darkness. I think World of Darkness is best for mystery and horror. Not political stuff, not combat, Not anything else, really. Not even really
Yep.
exploration. Just mystery and horror. Because that feels like how the game, I don't want to say is intended to play, because they have a bajillion books where you could play as supernatural creatures. But I find it the most fun for me is when I'm playing regular World of Darkness and I don't know what I'm up against, and I have to figure out it, like Scooby Doo. You gotta solve the mystery first before you can actually defeat the villain. If there is
Yeah.
any defeating of it, maybe it's a cosmic horror thing where it's just like shrug. Well, I guess that's just how the universe is. And like you have this demonic entity that can't be killed, like devouring the souls of the damned, just like hanging out in Wyoming. But nobody can do anything about it because what? Let's blow up the sun next. Let's stop that from,
From
burning us.
happening. Yeah, a really good horror system, in my opinion. Now, keep in mind when you try this system, it is deadly, like super deadly. Your characters probably won't survive, and they're not meant to. But the Call of Cthulhu games, that's a great horror genre. It's absolutely just terrifying to
Yeah.
to to run your characters through. It's so much fun.
Well,
I
you already have the mythos. Like
Yeah.
it's there for you. You don't even have to make up your own stuff. It's fairly easy to like understand as a system because it's just percentage based.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, you could die a lot.
Oh, you will die a lot. When you set up a character in a Call of Cthulhu game, you set up like 4 or 5, and don't get attached, because they're probably gonna die, and they're probably gonna die quick. Like I had a character that was he was copulated to death by fish monsters, and that was just a thing that happened in the first 45 minutes of gameplay. So yeah,
Gross.
be aware of your surroundings and stay away from water in this game, because your DM will kill you with it. And if you're
Hey,
the
Xander.
DM, kill him with water.
Xander, that seems to be a recurring problem for you in various
Yeah, it
tabletop
does.
games.
It does. My character Kenton, he hates water. Big water, anything with life in it.
Anything that could
Because
possibly or theoretically have fish in it.
yeah, like a desert sand, Nick.
Hell yeah, sand sharks.
Fucking sand sharks. Really?
If you go to
Damn
the,
it.
I don't think you're ever going to get there, so I'm just going to go ahead and say this. If you ever go to the plane of air, then I'm going to have sky sharks. It's going to happen. You're not going to go there because I don't think there's any way in hell you're going to decide to do that as part of the story.
No. Not unless Faradrex's ass is in the plane of air.
No, I'm not going to make that more complicated as after it's already super complicated. But all this talk about getting your characters killed by various things and fish related nonsense brings up another question you need to be asking yourself is how lethal do you want the system to be?
Yeah, because when you sit down to create a campaign as a GM, and one of the first things you should do is talk to your players. How lethal do you want this game to be? How gritty and realistic should you make it? And by and large, you are restricted in some ways as a GM by the system that you're using. Now, keep in mind, one of the first things any rule book for a role-playing game will tell you is that these are suggestions and things that we have come up with to help you along the way. But you can totally throw half this out the window and it'll still work fine as long as you replace it with something that is more to your liking. So
Yeah,
how
but
lethal you want the game to be is a decision that you have, but the system definitely dictates some of that. World of Darkness is about a 40% on the
I mean,
scale.
I put that about mid-range on the
Yeah, it's
scale
about mid-range.
because if you
D&D is
fuck
pretty
up,
low.
you could die really fast. But that's the game where it's like if a dude with a baseball bat in an alley can kill you.
Yeah,
But
same thing with
like,
Shadowrun.
I mean, if
Like,
you're
guns are scary.
yeah, if you just roll up on somebody on the side of the street and you just start pushing them around, they might just pull a gun and shoot you. Like you'll die. But if you're prepared, then generally you can get out of most situations.
Yeah.
Conversely, a game like D&D, which is like 1% lethality for 5th edition, and scales up dramatically the further back you go.
Oh yeah, like fucking
First edition
fucking
was like a
first-
90% mortality rate.
Yeah, like your mage could die by like the average person the average NPC dude can do 1d2 bludgeoning damage with their fists, but a house cat,
1d4
4
lethal.
damage. 1d4 lethal. A fucking house cat, really. It
Oh,
was
that's so funny.
insane.
But
It was
we'll use Fifth
absolutely
Ed because
insane.
that's the one that's actually out right now.
Yeah.
So that one, it's all right. Unless you're doing some real hard stuff to the players, it's kind of hard to kill them.
Yeah.
Like with the death saving throws, the almost infinite ways you could just get back up from being critical, and like healing magic and all this other shit. Like it's hard to just kill even one player. In fact, it's so hard in Legends of Latir. I had several level. Were you guys 7 or 8 at the time?
I think we were level 8 at the
Level
time.
8, because you know what I'm about to. You know what the example
Yeah.
is.
I
So
know what the
level 8,
example is.
they ended up. This was a fight they were supposed to run from. They fought a beholder, full power, in his lair, which, according to the book, was like CR 15. They aced him. I don't think anyone even got to like half health.
No,
They
not even
just
close.
destroyed him, and I was like, "The fuck?" Because I was playing the beholder like he was trying to stay away from everyone because they had like melee combatants. So he was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna fly up to my ceiling and just blast you with eye beams." But apparently that wasn't good enough. So
Apparently not.
they just trashed him. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you're looking for a fairly low lethality game, then D&D, that general fantasy stuff for the most part, will get you going. Riddle of Steel, I've never actually played it, but since it's
Nor have I.
based more on realistic medieval combat, then and I think they do have rules for like infection and like stuff like that. So I assume that's closer to the more lethal range. Then you could go games that are like crazy mega lethal, like Call of Cthulhu, where you go in with 4 or 5 characters when you start the game, or another game like Paranoia, which I've seen people die in character creation
Yeah.
more than
Oh my
once.
god.
Even that is so fucking funny to me. So for those who don't know, Paranoia is a game set in the future where pretty much America went into this big bunkers, big vaults, operated by an autonomous AI that refers to itself as friend computer, and it's a very like authoritarian setting in here, and you have no idea what's going on outside this vault. So if you're thinking Fallout, it's basically if you played all of Fallout without ever leaving the vault. Um, Also, the complex is Alpha Complex, as it's called, is much bigger than just the traditional like vault. But regardless, so you're playing troubleshooters tasked with solving various problems throughout Alpha Complex. You have to obtain certain clearance codes, and your DNA is kept on file, so that way, in case you die, you could be recloned and be replaced by yourself effectively. And it's also very easy to die. So if you sass friend computer, then there's a good chance one of the automated turrets around Alpha Complex will probably just swivel over and vaporize you. You can actually see this on the cover of the book, as like there are 3 troubleshooters. 2 of them are looking real concerned because the middle one has been turned to a pile of ash by friend computer. And the story I'm thinking of is the player was sassing the GM as their character during character creation. So he was like, you know what? This clone isn't worth it. That one gets scrapped. Put on your next character. So after like
Oh my god.
four clones went through before they finally decided, maybe it's not a good idea to keep,
Sassing friend
dogging
computer.
friend computer. And then they finally got to make the character. So if you want a game that lethal and that ridiculous, then I'd go with Paranoia.
I haven't played this yet, and I am hearing that is one of the one shots we're gonna run sometime in the near future.
Oh, we gotta. It's a good short campaign or one shot game. Not so much
yeah.
for an entire campaign. Not just because of the lethality. There are other aspects such as the players aren't actually supposed to know the rules, so the GM needs to know the rules. Oh, speaking of that first question we asked, how easy is the system? Paranoia is something that the GM is you have to know everything, and the players actually have to know nothing. Uh, it's it's really weird, but I guess that's just so you can make dumb mistakes and die faster. I don't know.
Yeah. Another fairly lethal game, at least by the rules standards, is Shadowrun. It's about an 8 on the scale. But dude, swords.
It dep-
Swords will cut.
Well, hold on. It depends on like what you're playing. So,
Yeah.
unlike Dungeons and Dragons, which generally speaking everybody is on a roughly the same lethality rating, barbarians, they obviously have a lot more damage reduction than a wizard. But in the end, like if if the wizard's in close combat and he's not spec'd for that, then you done fucked up. And the same thing's kind of how Shadowrun works. So if your wizard is or your mage is spec'd to throw like fireballs and do stuff from a distance, then the people you're fighting are, as what they always need to do, geek the mage first. So
Yep.
their snipers are going to train on you, or maybe they're going to get their close combat guys to blow past your street samurai and go straight at you. Now, if this mage was also built to have a lot of armor when somebody actually does get to him, that can affect this too. Because
Damn it,
even though
Skylar.
yeah, that's right. Even though you can't dish out the melee damage, you could take it. Like if a big ass troll rolls up and starts like whacking you with a bat that's just has a bunch of nails in it, and you have like armor spells and you're wearing all sorts of shit, then it'll just bounce off you effectively. Like you're gonna get
Yeah.
smacked a lot, but you're not gonna take damage. But
That
if
stun damage, man.
But it-
Stun is fucking vital.
That's right. But if your street samurai comes up behind this troll, like does a shitload of damage, and then that troll turns around and he's like, "What the fuck was that?" and then like smacks you in the face, but your street sam doesn't have a lot of armor for some reason. They just wanted to go real fast, I guess. Then if
Yeah.
he gets hit, he's probably gonna get pasted. So
yeah, kind
it's
of like, or by a rocket launcher, maybe.
yeah, there's a lot more
'Cause-
nuanced reactions in Shadowrun.
Because a dude with a katana tried to fight a fucking Metal Gear Rex.
Don't fight Metal Gear Rex with a katana.
You will die. I promise.
Unless you're Gray Fox. Then you can do it because you get plot armor for the cutscene. Xander did
Yeah.
not have plot armor for the
I did
battle,
not.
so he got super dead.
Got super fucking smoked. And then Jesse blew it the fuck up with a giant gun, just like. He's like, no!
No!
It's done. Like 2 turns, it was gone, and I'm there with a friggin' sword trying to take this thing off.
You did do like 1 actual damage to it after all of its armor was applied.
Yeah.
You
One day, but
you nicked
sword.
it. You nicked it in the foot, and then it hit you with cluster bombs.
I dodged a few of them too.
You did. That was
quick as shit.
That was surprising. You survived longer than the half second you should have, but the full second, yeah, that was enough to get you.
Oh yeah, yeah it was.
But what we're kind of getting to with all of these questions is the biggest question, which is, what mindset do you and your players want to use to approach this game? The reason why
Yep.
we talked about all of like the different complexities and lethalities is because all of that plays into how someone will play your game. If I'm playing World of Darkness, I will not ever play like I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, where I just kick in the door, Munchkin style, and just start hacking away at everything. That'll get you killed real goddamn fast.
Oh yeah, super fast. And when your players approach a game, there's more than just the how they play their character in a physical, like to say, rules sense. But there's also a difference in the way your characters are played in a roleplay sense. Because in World of Darkness, there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of downtime actions where you're looking into things and trying to figure out the
Even if you
plot.
are playing one of the supernatural things and you're not doing much of the horror element of it, then the mystery is still there. It's always there. Whether or
yeah.
not it's just trying to figure out why something works if you're playing a mage, or who is I don't know what the term is, but I'm going to say regent of the city of New Orleans if you're playing Vampire.
Yeah, the Prince.
The Prince. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but so the way you come about how your players are going to play your game when you have chosen your theme and you've gotten all these things out of the way, one of the first things you should do is sit down with your players and just say, all right, guys, I'm gonna run a game. We haven't decided on a system yet. We haven't decided on any of the other things. What kind of game do you guys want to see? Do you want to have a lot of political intrigue? Do you want to have a lot of horror, a lot of mystery, a lot of like, do you want to have to be, scraping by for survival every second of the game? Or do you want to be traipsing down the middle of a dirt road, waiting for goblins to make the stupidest choice of their soon to be gone lives and attack a party of hardened adventurers? Like, how powerful do you want the characters to be? Like, is this high fantasy? Is it low fantasy? Is there a lot of magic? Is there none? All of these things will dictate what kind of brain space you have to be in as a GM in order to provide a compelling narrative for your players. That's key number one, is you want to provide a good story and you want to tailor that story to the kind of game they want to see. I've had players in a recent game that I ran where they had told me previously that they were experienced D&D players and it was a party of 8, and I'm like, all right, I can handle 8, man. I've handled 10 before, and it turns out they wanted to have a grittier, more serious game, and it turns out that the players, the only one who was honest with me about being new was one. Everybody else had played like one, maybe 2 game sessions from like a handful of campaigns over a long period of time. They didn't understand the rules very well. They did not prepare. And in a encounter on the second or third game, one of the characters died because they weren't paying attention. They didn't do the right things. And only one of the characters had a realistic understanding of things. And then continue on that same campaign. Character didn't actually die. He got resurrected by an ulterior being who had other motives. But one of the characters had triggered a trap and was bleeding on the floor, and the other characters are just still investigating this room, like not worried about the person who's literally dying on the floor. And I'm like, all right, maybe a super lethal campaign, even though you guys asked me for it, might not have been the best choice. Because you told me that like, get as much information as you can out of your players for what kind of mindset you got to be in, because I created this campaign to be highly lethal, very gritty, very dark, with horror and mystery elements and lots of investigation. And it turns out what they wanted was not that, and what they were prepared for was definitely not that. So be aware of who your players are and be aware of what mindset you need to be in. And talk with your players a lot beforehand, because you don't want to get in the same position I'm in, where that's concerned. Because they're like, dude, this is hard. I'm like, this is what you asked for, so
And the actual game mechanics can help inform, like, even without you sitting down and telling anybody anything, inform like what kind of decisions people are going to make. So, what system were you using for that game you were just describing?
That was D&D 5e, man.
That was 5e? Okay, so
yeah, it was simple.
So that's actually a good point. So let's take D&D 5th edition, which usually is generally not lethal, except in this case. And there's a lot of magic. There's a lot of hit points. There's a lot of numbers involved with what it is. So instinctively, and the way the game is kind of designed to be played, is more of like a power fantasy, where you're supposed to go in and just do what all the things that were wrong as part of Xander's story, those would be acceptable and encouraged in like a normal Dungeons and Dragons game, except for the guy who's bleeding out. That's some real bad role play right there.
That was terrible role play on their parts.
But if you had
just sat there and watched it.
But for example, if you had taken the exact same thing down to the frickin' letter of what was going to happen in that game, but you switched the system to what's a good fantasy one that really doesn't that is supposed to be super lethal and shit like that. Do you know any? Because I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Um, I can't either. I
All
think
right,
most
so
of
the
the fantasy
example
ones are actually
the example I was
pretty
originally
down.
going to use before Xander brought that up was comparing Starfinder to Stars Without Number. So they're both space games. They both involve like hyperspace and all your traditional tropes, including like some versions of magic and psychic powers. But even if you do the same scenario in each one, it's going to be approached differently because Stars Without Number is more of the space trucker, realistic cowboy bebop style game where the players are mostly getting by the skin of their teeth. Like the next payday, you don't know when the next payday is, and you're not sure how dangerous this guy with the t-shirt cannon gun really is, or what he's modified that to do. Now, if you took that exact same thing and you applied it to Starfinder, you approach it very differently all of a sudden because much like 5th edition, it's not a very lethal game from what I've seen. And so it might subconsciously encourage players to just go up and see what's going on rather than take the minute to be like, tell me about the surroundings in detail. They'll instead just be like, I want to walk up to the guy and talk to him, or I want to walk up to this guy and punch him, or I want to walk up to this guy, or sneak up to this guy in the rogue's case and steal that t-shirt cannon from him. And
Because
so,
t-shirt cannon, yes.
right, well, the t-shirt cannon is actually a modified rocket launcher to look like a t-shirt cannon. See,
So you can walk
that's
around.
the twist. If in Starfinder he shoots the gun like this rocket launcher, it blows up. People are like, "Oh no, I failed my reflex save. I took a lot of damage or whatever." But ultimately, I'm okay. In Stars Without Number, he fires the rocket launcher, and he's an idiot because he did it in close range. So everyone in the room's dead now. Reroll.
Yeah, reroll characters, man. But the example that I had put forward is that you can definitely tailor the system where lethality and where what kind of game you're going to run, and keep it for an easy system for newer players. But that mindset that I was in was very different than what my players were really wanting. So the mindset alone was what tanked that campaign. So making sure that you are in a good mindset and know how your players are going to interact with your story and what kind of story you want to tell is pretty much the one of the most important things that you need to understand as a GM. I made a flub. Like, don't do that.
Right, and don't be a
It's
vindictive
bad.
GM either. If somebody is
Oh
playing
no.
a super lethal game, maybe they're playing Call of Cthulhu, and you've played for 20 sessions, and they're still on their first character. Don't just kill them off just because that's what the rules kind of want you to do.
Oh no no.
Um, just
If they're clever
like
enough to
if
survive,
they've
then
solved
let them.
it, like if they're beating your problems and it's everybody's having a great time, then just let them keep doing the thing. Like if they fuck up, they fuck up, and if they don't, then I mean shit. Let's punch Cthulhu in the face, I guess.
It's probably a bad plan, but yeah, like
Probably. I don't know. This guy's gotten through some shit before.
yeah, I don't know. But and this goes back to one of our previous episodes. Be aware of who your players are, and getting things ready for the beginning of a campaign is really important.
And Xander, don't
But
forget, like,
yeah.
this is something that I think you should keep in mind as well, is that don't, if you can, like, the mechanics are there for a reason. So offload whatever cognitive, like, strain that certain aspects are causing to the game mechanics instead of trying to bend it to your will. Because, so I like sprinkling a lot of genres into my game. If I'm stuck on one genre for too long, then I just get bored with it no matter what it is, and I want to switch it out, even if it's in the same campaign.
Yeah.
Now, I'm I'm not going to try to make a game system do something that it's not supposed to do. Uh, at some point, just design your own game system if that's what you really want to do. But I'm not going to try to force the player who's playing the rogue in a D&D game to like not be shisty and steal stuff because that wouldn't make sense. Because even the way that the character in the book, like the mechanics are described, is it's tailored to do that. So if you don't want that in your game, then you can consider like banning rogues, if you want to take a drastic measure like that. Or maybe if that general style isn't what you're wanting to go through at all, then instead of like trying to fix the rules to do what you want, just be like, let's just not use the system. Let's use one that's more conducive to what we as a collective want to play, even if that does mean learning a new rule set and like getting through those initial hangups.
Oh yeah, and it's always a good idea that when you're perusing through your local Barnes and Noble, and you're looking for, the next purchase that you're going to make for your D&D collection, to pick up a game system book that you've never seen before. Like, say it's a Shadowrun 5th Ed. You've never played it, you've never read it, and you're like, let's see what this is about. Peruse through it. Get a couple of good chapters or so, read, and if you want to try a new system, absolutely do that. Go online. There's listings of the thousands of books that are out there, and if you want to run a specific thing, you can type into Google, say, gritty horror role-playing games, and it'll give you a listing of, like, Call of Cthulhu and stuff like that. And if it's a system you haven't tried before, give it a shot. There's no harm in trying to learn a new system. It'll expand your abilities as a GM, because each game system that you play and that you run as a game master increases the abilities that you have as a game master. It increases what you have at your disposal for other games. There's things about World of Darkness that I have carried over into a Dungeons and Dragons game, and there's things from World of Darkness that I carried off into a Shadowrun campaign. And those flavors and the way you kind of approach things, it really has to do with how much experience you've pulled, and knowing what kind of mindset you need to be in for a specific campaign can dictate that you could add things in from a completely different rule system that has some flavor that you really like, and that only expands your knowledge base. So totally go out and try a new system. Try 2, try 3. And
Yeah,
it's
well,
always good
it might
to
even
know.
just give you cool ideas for like when you're reading through the rules or the fluff or whatever the new book is. Then it might give you cool ideas for what to do in the campaign you're running in a completely different system. Maybe not a mechanical aspect, but just like an idea. And even
Oh
on
yeah.
the mechanical aspect of it, like, yeah, Xander, there's stuff that I put in, like, there's like certain house rules that I pretty much put in every game. We've talked about Righteous Fury before, which even though those
Oh
mechanics
yes.
aren't set in stone, like they literally cannot translate directly one system to another, but the idea is there. Like what triggers it? What sort of thing should happen afterwards? If you have something that you pulled from a different game system that you really like, then don't just go nuts with it. Don't just slap it in there. This isn't Java programming. You can't just slap another method on there and hope for the best. You gotta tweak it. You gotta.
Got to do a little bit of work to it. Like the difference between Righteous Fury and Shadowrun for Nick's campaign, when my character died, uh, Jesse's character suddenly had the the tunnel vision of, I've got to kill this thing because just aced my best friend, So he gave him plus dice to his to hit rolls and to the damage rolls. Conversely, in Dungeons and Dragons, when my character had an NPC that he was really close to, when this guy got geeked, he just got advantage on every one of the rolls. So make it work for the system that you have, but the idea is still there. The thing that triggers it and the thing that kind of moves the story along and creates a fun and intense narrative can still be the same thing, but how you tailor that to the game is very important. So do a little bit of research before trying to take something from System 1 and put it into System 2.
And with Righteous Fury, since we're on the topic, when I kind of try to put it into whatever game I'm putting it into, I kind of ask myself the same basic questions. The first is, which character is the closest to the character that died?
Yep.
Like in play. So in the Shadowrun example, Xander's character is the one who died. Jesse's character was the one who was closest to him in play, thus he got Righteous Fury. Nobody else at the table got Righteous Fury but Jesse. And the second thing that I ponder upon is how could I let the character do what they're already doing but more awesomer? And then third, how do I tweak this so that it doesn't immediately either win the encounter or completely outshine the other players? With Dungeons and Dragons, there were two instances of Righteous Fury. The first was the one Xander just described, and the second was when it was another NPC. Another NPC who was close to our barbarian Karks was killed. So Karks didn't get the same thing. He got some similar stuff, such as like advantage on attack rolls, which, yeah, mathematically changes it by a pretty dramatic amount, but not so much that it's impossible for him to miss. He also got maybe like an extra attack, or, oh wait, there was actually a third time, and that was when Mara's father died. And
yeah, Mara got fucking Righteous Fury.
I gave her key points to use, just for the sake of it. She was a bard, and I gave her key points.
It was dope as fuck, and she's fucking just laid into that freaking Medusa monster. It just absolutely just fucking, she was on like flies on shit. It was great.
It was really cool because the players get to feel nice. Like whoever gets it feels amazing. And you know, it's bittersweet because somebody had to die, but everybody else is like, hell yeah, get him. And then you, even as a GM, you're like, this doesn't negate my encounter though. So it was still very possible for them to lose each of these instances, but they already lost a character during the course of this, and generally speaking, party wipes just aren't fun. So
no,
we kind of that's why I have Righteous Fury.
Yeah, a party wipe is one of those things that I don't know any GM that's ever used a party wipe as a means by which to do anything productive. It's usually they're upset and ticked off about the campaign not going the way they want, so they're like, "Ah, rocks fall, you all die. You're all stupid. Get out of my house." You know, it's things like that. You should never be vindictive,
right? And
at your
for
players.
better GMs who like they're very happy with the game and everybody's having a good time, but you're playing one of those lethal games where it's just like, oh, we really fucked up, and then the whole party dies just, you know, because that kind of happens if you do decide to punch Cthulhu in the face. That he's just like, what are all these tiny creatures? Whatever. He waves his hand and they all vaporize. And, like, sure, that's a legit reason to have a party wipe. But generally, people just, like, you know, stay away from it. It's not very fun because then you have to restart. If you're using, like, a module book, you have to restart, like, the whole goddamn thing. And just, you know, the process of making characters, if you didn't already have one at the ready, that's pretty much what the rest of your night's going to be dedicated to. But, like I always say, if that's what your table has fun doing, then go right for it.
Yeah. Also, side note for that, something that's not quite a party wipe, but is definitely going to piss your players off. When I was a young GM and hadn't had a whole ton of experience, I ran a short campaign where all of the characters met in a pub, and they all got drunk, and then they went on their adventure, and then 10 levels worth of content had happened, and then at the end of the campaign, all the characters wake up because they all got drunk and passed out in the bar. None of the adventure ever happened. It was just a dream they all shared via magic, and that ticked everybody off. So yeah, be aware that sometimes a cool plot twist to you might not be a cool plot twist to them.
And pro tip, if you're going to use one of those cool plot twists, don't wait that many games. Maybe like 3 to 5 at most. At most, if you're going to do something like that.
Yeah, it was really cool in my head, and it turned out to be not so cool for the players.
See, I was going to do that. I was going to do that in Shadowrun ZX Advent originally. Yeah. That whole game fell apart, but that was my idea. They were actually just in a deep sim for the first however many games it was. It was only supposed to be
damn.
like 3. And then they were gonna like come out and be like, oh shit, what the fuck? But whichever system you choose to go with is based simply on what you think will be the most fun. Peruse as many systems as possible, and maybe you'll roll a nat 20 on campaign inspiration. Think on that, and we'll see you next time on the Playing God podcast.
Later, man.
Goodbye for now.